Well, now you were born here, right?
Oh, yes.
And
I was born at a home up on Route 44
out in East Canaan?
in East Canaan.
Uh-huh.
My dad, who ran away from home at age 14, and he lived up in the Alps in northern Italy, and went across the Simplon Pass into Switzerland, and some way found Merkel, Utah, Merkel. Merkel, Utah was a gold and silver mining town, and his brother and my father's sister ran a saloon in Merkel, Utah. In fact, I have pictures of the original saloon. This was back in the late 1890s. And in fact, I'm in the process of seeing that the Utah Historical Society get these pictures. They were interested in them. Getty Oil just bought the whole town of Merkel, Utah, and they're restoring it. But when the silver ran out, my dad came back to Canaan. Now, I don't know how he ever found Canaan after Merkel, Utah, but he did come back here to Canaan. And lived with friends over here where the Fungos live, on the foot of Furnace Hill. And they knew my mother, so they had my mother come over from Italy to meet my dad, and that's what it was. They met and got married. And
now, was she brought to be his bride? I mean,
Yeah.
was it arranged before she came? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And was that the norm for that period of time?
I think so, because most of the men who came here, well, they had trouble with, although my dad did speak English pretty well, but I suppose they had problems communicating with the American ladies, and they just weren't comfortable with them, so the ladies were brought over from Italy to get married.
Now, that always seems like such a chancy thing to do. Were your parents happy when they never met before?
They had 6 children, and they were married when they both died. The marriage lasted. They worked so hard, they didn't have time for family problems. I was amazed at how hard they used to work. My dad worked at the Barnum Richardson furnace up the road here. And each morning before he went to work, he would, by hand, cut probably a half acre of hay. And then the children would go out, and we'd turn the hay over during the day so it would dry on both sides, and rake it up. And he would come in the evening, after working all day at the furnaces, bring the hay in by hand, pitchfork at a time.
Wow.
We always had cows, a couple of pigs, 30 or 40 chickens, a huge garden, so that they worked from sun up to sunset and raised their family, and we never felt that we were deprived of anything. We're always very happy, without running water, without indoor plumbing.
Wow.
But, gee, we all very happy.
Now, did they have a farm? It sounds like they had some land that they were working.
Well, I think the reason why the people here in the area survived the Depression was that they did have, you might call it a farm, but it was only a couple of cows, but they didn't have to buy groceries, they didn't have to buy meat. Once a year they would slaughter the pigs, and they make enough sausage and food for the winter. The vegetables would be put in the, canned, preserved, along with barrels of wine and barrels of cider. That would.
Did he make his own wine and cider?
Made his own wine. The cider, of course, was made at Ned DeLone's cider mill, so all we had to do was roll the barrels across lots. Working in the quarry, most of the stone was split by hand. The dynamite they would dynamite in the morning, and then the men would go out and with sledgehammers break the big stones into little stones, load them in dinkies, and bring them over to the hopper.
Now, your dad worked he worked at the iron furnace, so he wasn't in the quarries.
He worked at the furnace, and then he went to work for Ives and Pierce. They had a feed and coal business, and he would load the feed and coal. All of the coal came in on gondolas and would have to be unloaded by hand, the gondolas, into the sheds alongside the track. This would all be done with a shovel. And then from the shed into small 100-pound bags, put on a flat truck, delivered to a house, and carried on their back and put into the coal bin in the basement.
Wow.
And occasionally when the weather was real warm in the summertime, my dad, after he milked the cows, fed all the chickens and the pigs and everything, would go back to the railroad siding and unload coal because it was cooler to do it at night rather than during the day. And I could never understand that. It wasn't overtime. It was just convenient for him to unload that coal at night when it was cooler. Then the next day they'd go to work. He would ride to work on his bicycle from East Canaan and deliver this coal, feed, and then drive home at night on his bike and take care of his little farm.
Wow.
I tell you what happened. Down in Green Acres, Lawrence Rinaldi built several of those homes, as you know, with the basement underneath the house.
Yeah.
Well, one day my dad thought he would make it easy on himself. Rather than carry the coal, he backed the truck into the garage. So all he had to do was pull it off the back of the truck and dump it into the bin, not realizing that once he took all the coal off the truck, the springs went up and he couldn't get the truck out of the garage.
Oh no.
So he put the coal back
Oh no.
to get the truck out. I thought it was a big joke, You think?
All that work.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awful. How old did your father live to be?
Oh, he died as he lived to be 64, but he was in very poor health because of a heart attack. And when he was in his middle 50s, he just overworked. Everybody said he was probably one of the hardest workers we had in the community. He worked so hard.
Oh, that's absolutely outrageous that anyone should work like that.
Well, I think there are quite a few men who worked, for example, with my dad, who died young because they worked so hard. Mr. Manasseh and so many others that just worked very, very hard. But they didn't complain about it. They expected to work this hard. They didn't say, oh, gee, I'm working too hard, I want to join the union. I think they were very happy to have a job, to support their family, and just didn't mind work. They did it all their lives. Today, I don't think anyone works as hard as that generation did.
No.
All right.
Now, obviously he worked so...
Built that home, cleared the land.
So he owned the property and...
No, he bought the property from, I think it belonged to the Sweeneys and then Mrs. Zucco. And Dad bought that land. And I remember he bought an acre of that land for $1,000, and we thought, what a tremendous price to pay for an acre of land, $1,000. But he cleared the land so that he could grow the hay for the cows and pasture the cattle. And how hard they worked. The soil was and the area was very rocky. A lot of huge boulders. Well, today they've got bulldozers and everything, but my dad would dig a big hole alongside the rock, and then just flop the rock into the hole and cover it. And they did that, over acres and acres. The little stones they would pick up and make stone walls. And if it was a medium-sized stone, they'd build a fire over it, and the heat would crack the stone, and they'd take the small stone. That's the way they cleared the land. With a shovel and a pick is about all they had. And they worked very, very hard. I think we enjoyed it.
Tell me a little bit about the social life of a teen during that period of time, or even younger than teen. But
I'm not sure there was a social life.
too busy turning the hay during the day, huh?
Yeah, in fact, I have a picture of my 8th grade class, and I think it was only 5 boys. John Segala, Gidio Zucco, Leo Segala, Dickinson from Falls Village, and myself. There were very, very few in each class, so and you more had a tendency of staying within your own class. So you didn't. Oh, a Saturday afternoon movie at the Colonial. Occasionally we would go bowling in the Boskedon's bowling alleys, but I don't remember any social life at all.
What would children in East Canaan do for fun? They must have gotten together and played.
We'd roller skate to the center of town and meet. On the main road too, Didn't have to worry about traffic. It was paved. Yes, the road. I think the road was paved at that time around in the middle 20s. So there was paved. We could roller skate all the way to Stratton Store and buy penny candy and meat there and play a little football, and that was about it. You know where the East Canaan Green is? Where the tower is?
Yeah, right.
That was our football field.
Oh, really?
Right. Didn't give me much room, but...
No, I don't think you could get too much of a pass on that area.
No. That big bell would interfere occasionally.
Well,
But actually, social life, I don't remember these until we probably got to high school. Went to an occasional dance. We didn't have dances. We didn't have parties. I think I was married about 10 years before I had my first birthday party.
Really?
Yeah. So, and I don't think I didn't miss it. I didn't know the difference.
You didn't know about it, so you couldn't miss it.
Didn't know about birthday parties.
Well, my mom always tells me about going down to Boardman's Pond.
Borden's Pond, skating.
She lived, of course, in the center, and she always has told me that if you were anybody at all, you were there in the afternoon, and you were a total social outcast if you didn't show up at the tennis courts or the Borden's.
Well,
So, did the kids from East Canaan take part in that at all?
occasionally we would go to Borden's and skate. Particularly if there was some girl that we were interested in, we'd make that long trip. Because it was 2.5 miles.
Yeah.
And it was quite a long trip to come into Canaan. So that we skated, we went swimming in the Blackberry. And I never learned to swim because most of the boys learned to swim in the quarry, and my mother wouldn't allow me to swim in the quarry, so I never learned how to swim.
Really? Were you the only boy in your family?
Yes, 4 sisters.
And were you the youngest?
Youngest. I was the fortunate one. I had 4 sisters, waiting on me hand and foot. I had everything. No
And
problem.
the only boy.
I was the only boy. Sure, it was so easy. Everyone sacrificed for me. So
Oh,
I had an easy,
nice
very
position.
easy childhood.
Now, you said your mother didn't join the PTA because she didn't speak English. You spoke Italian at home?
Always spoke Italian at home. And in fact, I went to Italy with my mother, and when I came back, I couldn't speak English because I went to kindergarten and part of first grade over there, and I had quite a time in the first few grades because I was learning English all over again, and the fact that we spoke Italian home all the time, so that was difficult. In fact, I still have problems.
Do you?
I think I do.
Do you speak Italian still?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't keep it up. I would be very honest with you, I think it was embarrassing not to speak another language. If we were in public and our parents spoke to us in Italian, we would be embarrassed and say, speak English. You know, it was, that's terrible. You don't speak a foreign language. Where today, I think you'd be proud of speaking a foreign language. Sure.
It really
But
is.
at that time, oh no, you'd have to speak English. No problem.
What did you do for holidays? Were there holidays? Did he take time off ever to spend with the family? What was Christmas like, for instance?
Oh, Christmas was Turun candy. You know what Turun candy is?
No.
The little square Italian candies. Popcorn balls. But a big meal. You'd think that ravioli would be enough, but there was always dishes of ravioli, turkey, fruits, and spend all afternoon at the dinner table, chatting, drinking wine, and it was a lot of fun. There wasn't too much under the tree, but we'd look forward to it and had a great day. Now, holidays, you couldn't take a holiday because you had the animals to take care of all day long. But occasionally going to one of the neighbors on Sunday afternoon to play bocce and drink a glass of wine, that was, I think, about the only social life. But really, we didn't feel as though we were deprived of any social life because we didn't realize that there was something like a social life available. We just enjoyed being home.
Well, the level of expectation was, I think for everybody, was different then. We didn't consider that we had any kind of leisure. I know my dad worked as hard as anybody could possibly work, I thought, and yet we had more time than your father had.
Yeah, he would take us swimming. Well, after we bought our first car, a Rio Flying Cloud, he came home one day with this Rio Flying Cloud. My mother couldn't believe it, you know, he'd go out and buy a car. But we would occasionally went to, I think, Bantam Lake swimming, and that was a big deal. But it didn't happen very often, 3 or 4 times during the course of the summer. On a trip like that. Or a drive to Torrington to visit relatives. That was a big day.
Yeah.
You know, that would last a long time. You know?
A major adventure.
Oh, that sure was. Yes. Yeah. In fact, there used to be a gentleman that, I don't know what his name, we used to call him Peopley. And occasionally he would lay out a route where 2 or 3 families would go for a ride on Sunday afternoon. And I remember one Sunday we went as far as Bear Mountain Bridge. And well, we had all packed a lunch, and we stopped along the way and had lunch. It was an all-day trip to go to Bear Mountain Bridge. And he had the route laid out. And so we went out with a caravan, you know, visit Bear Mountain Bridge. Looked at the bridge, turned around, and came back.
Now, I presume it was a big thing for your family when you went to college. That must have been a major symbol of success, was it not?
I was the only one that went to college. The rest of my sisters, I'm sure. Well, I know my older sister only went as far as 8th grade, and then she went to work for a family in New York City as a domestic. And that was expected of all the older girls, you know, that after 6 or 7 years of school, that was plenty. You went out and earned a living to help support the family. And in fact, that's how my family first met the Garlascos. My sister Sophie was their maid. And when they lived in New York City and ran the Club Lido there, and she lived with them in New York City. And then when they moved to Canaan, no, she had left by that time because She went to work for a family in Armonk, New York. And most of the girls did that. My sister Seal left school. I don't think she went to high school, but she went to work for before Martin, Parsons Store, before Martin O'Neill. And my sister Rose, who was the one older than I was, the first one that completed high school. So,
and they all contributed money back to the family support?
Oh, I know my sister Rose, she was working for the state highway at the time, was also contributing my tuition. Everybody did that. They took care. That's why I was the fortunate one. You know, I was the youngest, and they all were contributing to my welfare.
It's good to be the youngest at that rate, huh?
Yeah. The sad part of it is I was never able to reciprocate. You know, it was. It's one of the things you look at. You could never repay them for what they did.
Now you went to school and then you came back to Canaan, and what did you do when you first came back as an adult after your training? Did you go right into Newkirk's?
The funeral home that I was working for in Hartford was Roger Newkirk's father. So that during the Korean War, I was drafted. I was drafted 3 or 4 times. I would get as far as New Haven and get rejected. But Roger asked me to come to work for him here in Canaan. And that was in 1945. And been here ever since.
This may be kind of an oddball question, but I always wonder how